Beautiful Jellyfish, is Tracy, and today, my tripod's in the way. Bro, you need to move. Okay, so before I get into this video, I want to let you guys know, if you haven't already, definitely check out my channel updates. I don't do them very often, but just to like update on some things that are happening. I'll list it in the description box below. One of the main things that I talk about in there is I make a vlog channel, and basically, if you want to follow me and see my crazy little life, you should check out that channel, which will also be listed in the description box below. So today we're going to be talking about drafting, and I kind of, really wanted to do this video a little bit closer to Modern Masters, but just with like other uploads that I wanted to film and stuff, I just didn't get a chance to film it. But I do think that this is a pretty important topic that I think it's just very interesting because I've heard very different perspectives on the subject matter. And I want to kind of take us back a little bit to a pro tour that happened. It was for Modern Masters 2015, I believe. So this is going back a little bit. And there was a situation that happened, and basically there was this guy, Pascal Magnard, and he was drafting, and he had the choice between a foil Tarmogoyf and a Burst Lightning. Burst Lightning was like $1, and foil Tarmogoyf was like mad money, because if you draft in like Pro Tour events or whatever, they have this little stamp on it, so it says like, it's this little stamp that's from like the modern, like a Pro Tour, which is really cool. It's a really sort of sweet thing. But anyways, this situation happens, and he picks this foil Tarmogoyf, and people are outraged. It's not just like, oh, it's a foil Tarmogoyf, it's like foil Tarmogoyfs are like $400 or something like that. This was like, because it has a stamp on it, it was worth like, I don't know, like $10,000 or something crazy like that. It was really outrageous. And, people were very upset about the situation because he was already in red. This must have been like pack 3, I think at this point. It was like a first pick, pack 3. And he was like, he chose the foil Tarmogoyf, and people were so upset. Other pro players were just like, I can't believe you did that, you're a disgrace to the game. And basically Pascal Magnard was like, I'm gonna donate all this money that I get to, charity, and then people were still salty. Why? I don't know. But the moral of it, and I know you're like, why are you talking about a story that happened in like 2015? Because it's still pretty relevant, and not necessarily just that story, but the whole idea of picking value in between, picking value over picking a card that's actually beneficial and going to be used for your deck. He was nowhere in green. It's not like he was using the card in his deck at all. The reason why I picked it is because it was a really expensive card, and that's a lot of money. And so, I also feel, and other story time, hold up, I gotta dump my tea bag in the garbage. I've got this Hershey Park mug, which is very different than my other mugs. I'm a fan of big tea mugs, as I think most people are, just because you get, like, more tea. It's, like, more value. It's great. But I have this Hershey Park mug. I went to Hershey Park when I was in, like, it must have been, like, 10? Oh, man, my tea's hot. It's real hot. Okay. Tongue's burnt. It's okay. Everything's fine. So, basically, then let's flash forward to this time that I'm drafting. I honestly don't even remember what set I'm drafting, but I'm at this game store, and I'm drafting, and do you hear the phone? It's ringing. Don't they know I'm filming? Honestly, I can't. Who calls our house? Who honestly uses like home phones anymore? That's like a thing of like the past, but whatever. So I've decided that in my future home, I'm just not going to have a house phone, like call my cell phone. But then I realized, because I actually started thinking about why we have home phones, because what if like I drop my cell phone in water and like someone needs to contact me, and then it's just, whatever. It's a good point, man. It's just saying. Anyways, I don't know, we got off on a tangent. I don't even know what we're talking about. So, I was at my game store and I was drafting, and I picked this one card, and then, there was this other card in my, in my 15 or whatever, that was like $20 at the time. It was the standard card. It was some artifact, I don't even remember what it was. And, afterwards, or it may have been like, actually, as I passed the cards to one of my friends, he was like, Tracy, you do understand this card is like $20, right? Like, what did you take over it? And it must have been a couple turns later. It definitely was a couple of like draft cycles later, because I didn't even remember what card I picked. And I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, I have no idea what I picked over it. Like, I honestly, at the time, I don't even think I knew that it was $20, which I think is an interesting thing, because not everyone who drafts plays Standard. Like, I have never played Standard before, and I don't know if I'll ever play Standard. but I would draft all the time. And so there were cards like, if I saw like a fetch land, I was like, duh, it's expensive. If I saw like a Shocklight, I was like, that's gonna be worth something. A Planeswalker, unless it's like Tibalt, like I knew it was gonna be worth something. So it's not like I didn't know anything. And then at my same sort of game store situation, there was a, oh man, which one? It wasn't Eternal Masters, so it must have been Modern Masters 2015, I'm pretty sure. It was Modern Masters 2015, and there were a couple of younger kids drafting, which was interesting to me because that draft is way more expensive. I want to say most game stores charge like $45 or $50 if you're drafting Eternal or Modern Masters, which makes sense. The set's more expensive, the packs are more expensive. But actually, if packs are selling for like $10, you've just kind of lost on value a little bit. I don't know. I have my own opinions about drafting those higher sets. Maybe we'll talk about that in there. Who knows? In this video, who knows? But anyways, so one of my friends actually made a list of all of the cards that were more than $25 or something like that. Something that was, you know, a significant amount. And he posted this list in the game store, and he said to all these kids, he's like, listen, he's like, if you draft one of these cards, he's like, you need to take one of that. He's like, I don't care if you're in the different colors, whatever. He's like, this will pay for your draft. So it had to be a significant number. It was a large number. And and then he said, he was like, listen, if you pass some of these cards, people are going to take them, and you're probably not going to, you know, it's not going to pay for your draft. So he's like, take these cards. And he's like, especially a card like Tarmogoyf. He's like, that card's really expensive. He's like, take the card. And it was really interesting to me because, you know, he was explaining it to these kids who, you know, I'm not trying to like bash younger people who play at all, but, you know, some younger people, and I mean, honestly though, but this could be applicable to other, which I thought was interesting because he didn't say that to other people who'd played Magic before. He just really targeted this at the younger kids and said, hey, like, you know, make sure you take these cards. But what if I was someone who was new coming in, like, which I thought was interesting. So I feel like it was him being a little bit like, oh, you're a kid, you may not know the prices in the market that's going on right now. So that's an interesting sort of thing, but I think his sort of thing was, I don't know if it was, maybe it was a little bit rude, maybe it was a little bit judgmental that it was saying that these kids didn't know what it looked like. I don't really know. But back to my example where I took that card that was not as much money, it may have been like a common or an uncommon or something like that. And I got like, I don't want to say I really got flack for it because it wasn't really like a huge deal. But, you know, he was just, like, pointing out, like, hey, why didn't you take this expensive card? And I thought at that time that I was looking at it, and I probably said that that card maybe wasn't that great in, you know, in my draft deck. But it was an expensive sort of card. And so kind of going back even to the Pascal Magnard example, which you can look up if you want to learn more information about it. But with that whole sort of situation it's one card. And we all know that one card can make a difference. We all absolutely understand that the value of top decking that one of in your deck that's going to save you. We all understand that. We all get that. But on the same token, you can flip that and say, it's just one card. How much can it really necessarily mean? So I think that's an interesting sort of situation where you're taking cards that are value heavy rather than cards that are actually going to make your draft deck better. And I feel like this is especially applicable to those Modern Masters and Eternal Masters because you have very high price points in those sort of decks. Whereas I feel like if you look at a lot of sets that are like, you know, like Amonkhet is coming out, you know, that set, you know, we'll have cards that are like money, you know, we'll have cards in there, but like, you know, it's not going to be like, we've got like 30 cards that are above $25, you know. The likelihood of that happening, it's just not very high. It's not something that's probably going to happen. So, my whole thing is, one of my things with the whole Pascal Magnard example is I look at that for the people who are giving him flack and I say, wouldn't you do the same thing? Wouldn't you take that foil Tarmogoyf over a Burst Lightning, which was like $1 or 50 cents. Like, really, what would you have done in that sort of situation? And I can't say I would definitely have done this, or I don't honestly really know. I don't fault him at all for doing it, because I really do think that a lot of people, even those people who are like, ugh, he's a terrible Magic player, and we're gonna disown him or whatever, like, I just thought that was, like, absolutely outrageous. And I think, like, you know what I think it was? Is I think a lot of it was like, oh, you're a pro player, you're supposed to kind of, like, lead people by example and whatever, and I'm just like, I don't know, I don't feel like that really makes sense. My thinking about this process, I guess we could say, is that, like, okay, I want to take one of my friends, Craig Rocco, when I watched him draft, and he was very interesting when he drafted. This was, I think, again, I keep saying Modern Masters 2015, but I think it was that. He was drafting, and he drafted this super sweet, very aggressive, burn, mono red, like, aggressive, hit you in the face type of deck. Now, his deck, he did not have, like, anything in that deck that was remotely expensive. He straight up drafted, he drafted red, pretty much all of his cards were red, that's just what he did. And he said, like, at one point, I remember, he was in between a card, I mean, the card really was, like, $5 or $10, it wasn't, like, gonna break the bank or anything like that, but he chose the card that was better for his deck rather than the card that was like $10, because his process is, if I build this super sweet deck, then I am going to win, and I'm going to get packs, and so, or, you know, store credit. So that's kind of, in a sense, sort of like the same thing where it balances out, where if I had taken a couple of super high expensive cards that weren't necessarily good in the draft format, that maybe I wouldn't have done as well and I wouldn't have gotten packs. And so I think about two players who, so like, let's talk about that little kid example. And I'm not saying that little kids can't win or that they're incapable at all, but some little kids, you know, go in and they, I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I think a lot of us have seen it, where we see a lot of kids go in and they know that they're not as good of a player and that they have a lot more to learn, and so they'll take those high expensive value cards because they're like, well, I'm just gonna lose anyway, so I might as well take this card that's like $30 so that it helps pay for some of my draft, and then I have this super sweet card to trade so I can get cards for another one of my decks, or like something like that. I think there also may sort of be like this whole thing of, like, in my friend Craig's example, like when he was drafting all the cards that were really good for his deck rather than all of like the value cards, which is interesting because we could honestly take that word and say that both of those situations are value. Like the foil Tarmogoyf. The foil Tarmogoyf is value because it's a really expensive card and it's a mildly okay card. It's not like you're drafting a card that's expensive, but it's only used in this one specific type of format. Or it's only good for one thing, basically. So it's that. But then Burst Lightning is also a pretty decent burn card. And, you know, those both have value, but it means different sort of things. So with my friend Craig's example, I think some people would look at him and say, oh, he's drafting right. He's sort of drafting in the right way because he's only drafting cards that are going to be beneficial to his deck. He's not drafting these cards because they're gonna pay the rent this month, or like something like that, which I'm actually pretty curious about, because in a situation where you take a very, very high value card, like a foil whatever, is some people honestly could turn that around and sell it on eBay, and that could, in a sense, help them pay their car payment, rent, or something like that. I don't know how, like, true that is. If you guys have any sort of experiences like that, like where you do that, or you know people who do that, I'm actually very curious to know that, because I think I've come from playing with people at my game store who spend money on cards and the money is not really an issue, so I'm interested to see people who maybe necessarily don't have that kind of privilege, who don't have that advantage where, you know, I'm just curious. So if you have any experience about that, I don't know, maybe that's not true at all. Maybe there's people who don't do that. I don't know. I just want to know. So if you have opinions about that, I'd really like to hear them. So, but yeah, I mean, if there was ever a situation between that, like, are you going to scold a Magic player because they happen to draft a card that could help them, you know, pay the rent that month, or a card that's going to be better for their deck? I don't know, it just doesn't really, like, make too much sense to me. So, but I am going to be filming a video soon talking about, I don't necessarily know what to call this video, but kind of like I actually have a working title, but it's like how many of that should you run kind of sort of thing, and it kind of falls under the same lines of like talking about one-ofs and how, like, again, they can make and break a deck. And I know it sounds like, oh, it's just one card, and in a draft it's like one card out of 40. Typically, you know, some people can run a little bit more than that, but what's that one card gonna make? Well, it makes a huge difference, absolutely. So, yeah. I feel like this is the first video in a while that hasn't been like 900 minutes long, which is pretty great. So, check out that update video if you want to find out more information. Check out my blog channel if you're interested in that. And let me know what you guys think as always, and I'll talk to you later.